There is a security report sitting in the government committee's files right now. It was not written by a tabloid and it was not leaked by an enemy. It was written by the men paid to keep Prince Harry alive, then handed to the committee that decides who the British state protects. Inside it is a line that reads like a verdict. It says that even after he walked away, Harry is still the king's son and still a symbol of the crown. Those are not my words. They are the words in his own file. Tonight, we read that file and we read it beside the one document that answered it. This is not another story about hurt feelings. This is a story about paper. One document was written by Harry's own security team in February to make a case. A second document was written by 3 senior judges, and it runs to 21 pages. Both describe the same man. They reach opposite conclusions about what he is owed. A former royal living in America is telling the British state he could be killed on its soil. The state has written back with a phone number. That is the distance we are measuring tonight. And in the gap between those two papers, a 5-day visit to Britain is about to happen. Harry is due in the country from the 7th of July. He comes to mark 1 year until his Invictus Games in Birmingham. What we know publicly is that his wife and his 2 children may not come with him at all. Not because of a schedule, because of what these 2 papers say. Tonight we go through the full picture, the report his own firm prepared, and the 6 plots it names, the al-Qaeda line that turns a legal fight into a matter of life and death, the 21-page judgment that answered him last year, the review board that was quietly paused before anyone had to decide, and the question sitting underneath all of it, the one nobody on that committee will say out loud. Let's start with the committee, because everything runs through it. Its full name is long, so most people use the short version, RAVEC. It decides which public figures in Britain get protection paid for by the taxpayer, members of the royal family, senior politicians, people judged to be at real risk. There is no public list of who qualifies. There is no public list of the rules. What we know publicly is that RAVEC has 9 members and that several of them come from inside the royal household itself. In early 2020, Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties. RAVEC changed his status. The automatic, round-the-clock protection he had known his whole life was taken away. In its place came a single word that has followed him ever since: bespoke. It means his security is now decided trip by trip. It is based on where he goes, and on the threat level at the time, he has to give advance notice. He has to make the case again every time he lands. Harry took that decision to court. He argued RAVEC had failed to follow its own process and had singled him out for worse treatment. He lost at the High Court first. A retired judge, Sir Peter Lane, called his reading an inappropriate formalist interpretation of the process. Then Harry appealed, and here is the part that matters for tonight. When he lost again last year, the reason the judges gave was not that he faced no danger. The reason was about what he is, not who he is, what he is. Harry did not go quietly when he lost. In his own statement, he said the ruling confirmed that RAVEC had failed to follow its own mandated processes for him. He said he had been singled out for unjustified, inferior treatment. Reportedly, the legal bill approached £1.5 million. He lost the money, he lost the appeal, and he kept the danger. If you watched A Certain Funeral in 1997, you remember the boy walking behind his mother's coffin. That boy is the man whose security file we are reading tonight. And his own team had to write that file at all. That is what makes the rest of this land with the weight it does. Now, let's talk about the report, not the gossip version. The version his own firm put in writing. It has a name, and the name matters. It is called the Threat and Vulnerability Risk Assessment, marked confidential. It was prepared in February by a private security company employed by the Sussexes. The firm is based in the United States, and it does this work for a living. It was not written for a newspaper. It was written for RAVEC to be read by the very people deciding his protection. A copy was later obtained by ITV News, and what it contains is not vague. It is specific, dated, and dark. It found at least 6 plots against the Duke. They come, it says, from jihadist and right-wing threat actors, the kind that have targeted other high-profile Britons. 5 of those 6 plots came from inside the United Kingdom. That is the same country he is flying into next week. 6 plots, 5 from Britain, one of them naming him directly. That last one is the line that changes everything. The report includes an al-Qaeda document that called, in plain terms, for Harry's assassination. This is not fresh noise invented for a court case. Back in 2023, the FBI told his team that al-Qaeda had published a message on a closed channel referencing his killing. The report ties that history to the present. It notes that Harry has been a specific jihadist target ever since he served in Afghanistan in 2007 and 2008. There is one more detail in it that lingers. The firm noted that 4 of the people convicted over threats against Harry are now out of its sight. Their current whereabouts, it said, are unknown. 4 names, 0 locations. Here is where the reading gets sharp. The report makes an argument about role. It says, the threat against Harry does not care what job he holds. Extremists with grievances against Britain, it says, do not take his specific role into account. To them, he is not a former working royal who lives in California. To them, he is the king's son. His own team wrote it down in the coldest possible terms. The danger, they told the committee, sees only the blood, not the job title. And they ranked him. In writing, they called him potentially the most vulnerable member of the whole family for anyone seeking to attack it. His spokesperson echoed that same logic out loud this week, insisting the danger travels with the man himself. Sit with that for a moment because it is his own file, arguing it. The people paid to protect him are telling the state that the danger attaches to the person, not the position, and then the report goes one step further. It looks at what his private guards can actually do on British soil. They cannot carry firearms here. By law, only UK police, with RAVEX authorization, can carry lethal weapons while protecting him. So the report states the plain consequence in writing. Without lethal weapons, it says, his own officers are prevented from adequately responding to an armed attack. Then it lands its conclusion. The only way to reduce the real risks to the Duke, it says, is to give him state-backed security. That is not an opinion columnist talking. That is the assessment his own firm handed to the committee. If Regina Wood is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, take 1 second and hit the like button. It genuinely helps us reach more people who want the documents, not the drama. Now let's bring this back to the other paper, because everything I just read to you was answered in advance by 3 judges. The Court of Appeal ruling came down on the 2nd of May last year. Sir Geoffrey Voss, the Master of the Rolls, wrote it. Alongside 2 other senior judges, it runs to 21 pages, and its logic is the mirror image of Harry's file, where his report says the threat follows the person, the judgment says protection follows the group. Voss described Harry as a man stepping in and out of that group. Outside the UK, he was outside it. Inside the UK, his security would be considered as appropriate, case by case. And then came the sentence that decided everything. It was impossible, Voss wrote, to say that reasoning was illogical or inappropriate. He went further. He called RAVEX's decision understandable and perhaps predictable. Voss also found that the then chairman of RAVEX had good reason to depart from the written policy. In plain terms, the rule book could bend, and bending it here was lawful. The court's own paragraph 73 put it beyond doubt. So read the 2 papers together side by side. His own report names him a target because he is the king's son. The court's judgment leaves him exposed because he is no longer a working one. A file full of assassination plots, answered with a phone number. And that phone number is not a figure of speech. We are about to get there. But first, remember this. What the file warned about has already happened. The Daily Beast's Tom Sykes reported it, and he witnessed part of it himself. In September of 2025, during a London visit, a known stalker got within feet of Harry. Not once, twice, in 2 days. She breached a secure zone at the Royal Lancaster Hotel during an awards evening. 2 days later, she turned up at a research centre he was visiting. There was no police protection present, so a member of Harry's own office staff had to physically body block her. Sykes had seen the same woman himself at the Royal Courts of Justice during Harry's trial against the Daily Mail's publisher. That is not the report's theory. That is the report's warning, walking straight through a door. And then there is the board, because this is where the paper trail goes quiet in a way that should be loud. After the court loss, the entire bespoke system rested on one promised thing: a review, a risk management board that would actually sit down and weigh a case like this one. Harry's office says they were promised that board would meet before this visit. They were told it would be finished in March. Then, by every available signal, it simply stopped. The board was paused without explanation. There has been no review since the family left 6 years ago, despite promises of annual ones. Even now, a symbol of the crown, and no one has sat down to read his file. What arrived instead came in a letter at the very end of last week. Not a protection plan, not an armed detail. The phone number of a police liaison officer. That was the written answer to 6 plots and an assassination document. The report exists. It was submitted. It was weighed by no board. Subscribe to Regina Wood and drop a comment below with one word. If you had read that file, would a phone number have been your answer? And then there is what the king offered instead. Reportedly, Charles proposed a royal residence for the family to stay in. The property would be covered by security. Nothing else would. Harry had not responded as the trip drew near. His spokesperson explained why in one clean line. The issue, he said, has never been accommodation. Safe walls are only one part of a real plan, because risk follows the person, not the place. A guarded house does not guard a man once he steps out of its door. Step back for a second. Because by every available signal, I am not the only one reading it this way. Tom Sykes, who has covered this family for years, put it plainly. Whatever you think of Harry, he wrote, a way has to be found to keep him safe when he visits home. The incidents are not hypothetical anymore. The stalker was real. The gap at the hotel was real. The private staffer doing a police officer's job was real. When the warning in a document walks up to you twice in 2 days, the document has earned a hearing. What observers keep noting is the question of who sits on the committee. Those close to Harry point out that of Ravek's 9 members, 3 come from the offices of his father and his brother. Harry has long suspected the courtiers around them do not want him to have state protection. Kensington Palace flatly denies that the Prince of Wales has any representation on Ravek at all. The Home Office says only that its system is rigorous and proportionate and will not discuss individual cases. It is a small point with a long shadow. If men who work for his father help decide his protection, then the room itself is part of the story. The pattern suggests something quieter than a conspiracy and colder than an accident. A file gets written, a board gets promised, the board does not sit, the visit arrives, and the paperwork is still pending. It has happened enough times now to look less like delay and more like a choice. Step back and the shape is impossible to miss. One paper, written to save him, concedes the very thing later used to expose him. The same man in 2 documents is a symbol worth killing and a civilian not worth guarding. And the one process that could reconcile those 2 papers was switched off before it had to choose between them. To be fair, there is a real counter-argument here, and it deserves a full hearing. The royal commentator Robert Jobson made it clearly. He told Newsweek that Harry is facing the consequences of his own actions. Harry believed protection would follow him automatically, Jobson said. It did not. The obstacles in his path now flow from the deal he chose in 2020. That reading has genuine merit. Harry did choose to leave. The court did rule the arrangement lawful. And taxpayers are not obliged to fund armed guards for a man who lives abroad and holds no public role. That is a fair position, honestly held by a great many people. The reason it does not fully hold is written in Harry's own file. The threat, his team argues, does not read his job title. An al-Qaeda document does not check whether he is a working royal before it names him. And the process built to weigh exactly that argument, the Risk Management Board, was paused before it had to answer. Even Voss, while dismissing the appeal, called Harry's arguments powerful and moving. He said it was plain the Duke felt badly treated by the system. A grievance a senior judge calls moving is not nothing. So let's go back to where we started. The report is still there in the committee's files. The line his own team wrote is still on the page. Even after everything, it says he remains a symbol of the crown. The 6 plots are still listed. The al-Qaeda document is still cited. And the board that was meant to read all of it still has not sat. Not once. Not in 6 years. Not before he flies. On the 7th of July, Harry lands in Britain anyway. He may well arrive without his wife. He may arrive without his children. Not because the danger in that file was ever disproved. Because no one with the power to act has yet been made to answer it. He will mark 1 year until his games, shake hands and smile for the cameras, and somewhere in a quiet government office, the file his own team wrote will keep sitting where it sits, unread by the one board that was built to read it. We read the documents, we check the receipts, and tonight the paper is doing the talking, and it is saying something no press release can undo. Here is the question I want to leave you with. You have now read what the committee read: 6 plots, 5 from Britain, 1 naming him for death. If that file had landed on your desk, would your answer have been a phone number? There is an honest case on both sides, and I want to hear yours. Tell me in the comments, in one line, what you would have done. If this is the kind of breakdown you want, the receipts and not the noise, then stay with us. Subscribe to Regina Wood and hit that like button. We read the documents so that you can decide for yourself.